The world knew him as a radiant star, always smiling, full of life, a face that lit up every screen. But behind the hospital doors, after the chaos of his disappearance and miraculous rescue, Wang Xingyue's light dimmed to something quieter, softer, almost fragile. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from peace, but from pain, a silence that whispered of fear, reflection, and recovery. When Wang was first brought into the hospital, he was barely conscious. The doctors described him as a body surviving on willpower. His skin was pale, his pulse weak, and his eyes half-closed, searching for a familiar face in the blur of white coats and bright lights. The room buzzed with urgency. Machines beeped, nurses rushed, and voices called out medical instructions. Yet amid the chaos, there was a single steady presence, his mother. She stood beside him, her trembling hand holding his tightly, refusing to let go even for a second. The moment he opened his eyes, she leaned closer and whispered his name. His lips barely moved, but she saw it, the faintest smile, a flicker of recognition. "You're safe now," she told him softly, tears streaming down her face. "You're home, my son." It was the beginning of his healing, not the physical kind that doctors measured, but the emotional kind that only love could nurture. For the first few days, Wang remained silent. He didn't speak much, didn't ask questions. He simply listened to the soft hum of machines, the footsteps in the hallway, and the gentle rhythm of his own breathing. His world had been too loud for too long. The shouts, the fear, the darkness of captivity. Now, in the hospital's calm whiteness, he found something unfamiliar: safety. Nurses described him as polite but distant. He would nod when spoken to, thank them for every injection, and sometimes stare quietly at the window for hours. One nurse, May, later shared her experience. He wasn't broken. He was rebuilding. It was like watching someone find their way back from a nightmare. Every morning began with the same routine. The curtains would open to let the sunlight pour in, the nurses would check his vitals, and his mother would bring warm soup she made herself. She spoke softly, often about simple things: the weather, the family dog, the fans who sent flowers. Wang would listen, sometimes smiling faintly but rarely replying. His silence wasn't cold, it was heavy with thought. Then came the therapy. Physical therapists encouraged him to move, even just his fingers at first. Every movement hurt. His muscles trembled from weakness, but he never complained. One therapist remembered how he looked up between breaths and whispered, "I have to do this." They didn't know if he meant for himself, his family, or the people waiting for him outside. Maybe all three. The news of his survival had already spread worldwide. Fans gathered outside the hospital gates. Outside the hospital, the world buzzed with relief and celebration. But inside, behind those pale green walls, Wang Xingyue's life slowed to a whisper. The man who once dazzled millions now faced his hardest role yet, learning to live again. Days turned into quiet routines. The hum of medical machines became the rhythm of his world. Nurses moved softly through the corridors, careful not to disturb his rest. At night, when the hospital fell silent, the only sounds were the gentle tick of the clock and the distant rain tapping against the window pane. Wang would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying fragments of the past, the fear, the confusion, the cold darkness where time seemed to stop. Sometimes he would wake up drenched in sweat, his breathing sharp and uneven. His mother, who refused to leave his side, would rush to his bed, wiping his forehead gently. "You're safe now," she would whisper, her voice trembling with love. "It's over, my son." Her words were like medicine, soothing, steady, real. She had become his anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Doctors noticed his unusual calmness. He never shouted, never complained, never asked why this happened. He was quiet, but his silence carried meaning. It wasn't defeat, it was reflection. He had seen the edge of death and returned with a new awareness of life. Every breath was a reminder that he had survived something most never would. One morning, a nurse named May entered his room with a tray of breakfast and found him sitting by the window. The sunlight touched his face, highlighting the faint bruises that still lingered. He turned to her and said softly, "I used to chase lights for a living. Now I just want to feel the sun." That was the first full sentence he'd spoken since waking up. May smiled, realizing then that his healing had truly begun. Each day, he made small progress, steps so quiet they went unnoticed by the world but meant everything to him. The first time he stood up, he nearly collapsed, his knees shaking. The physical therapist caught him, but Wang insisted, "Let me try again." Sweat gathered on his forehead, his breath came in gasps, but he didn't stop. After several attempts, he managed to take a single step. The room erupted in gentle applause, his mother, the nurse, and the therapist all cheering softly. Wang smiled faintly and whispered, "That's one step closer to home." During visiting hours, his close friend Zhou came to see him. Zhou had been one of the loudest voices calling for his rescue, a brother in every sense but blood. When he walked in, he froze for a moment, overwhelmed by emotion. Wang looked thinner, paler, but his eyes still had that familiar spark. "You scared me, you know," Zhou said, his voice cracking. Wang chuckled weakly and replied, "I scared myself too." They both laughed, and for the first time, the room felt lighter. They spent hours talking about life, their shared memories, and how the world had changed while Wang was gone. Zhou told him how fans had flooded social media with love, how strangers had united to pray for him. Wang listened quietly, tears forming in his eyes. "I didn't know love could be this loud," he said softly. He began writing again, using a small notebook the hospital provided. Page after page filled with thoughts, reflections, and fragments of poetry. Some entries were dark, glimpses of the fear he endured, but others were filled with light. In one passage he wrote, "Silence is not emptiness. It's where strength learns to breathe." Those words would later go viral when shared by his team after his recovery. They captured what everyone saw in him, not a broken man, but a reborn soul. His room soon became a sanctuary of peace. Fresh flowers arrived daily, gifts from fans and friends.